Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. So the first Dharma talk of 2024, the year of the dragon. So we've got a dragon year. Be dragging on this talk. Sorry about that. So anyway, we're still studying Dogen Zenji's Shobogenzo Makahanyaharamitsu, and we're on paragraph 8. So last time we talked about paragraph 6 and 7. And in paragraph 6 and 7, Subhuti as the Buddha or the Buddha, in speaking to Indra, introduces this Prajna Paramita, or studying and venerating and honoring this Prajna Paramita as empty space. So that's, it's a really important and interesting term in this chapter of Shobogenzo. So just briefly, we talked about empty space as really, I think Dogen Zenji is using it here as a way to say that's the entirety of all beings, of the entirety of the universe. This empty space is a term from kind of formal Buddhist teaching, the Abhidharma. And it can mean either, the space between things, or just this unconditioned dharma of empty space. There are only a few things that are considered, in classical kind of Buddhism, that are not conditioned by anything. And, one of them is this space of the entire universe. Another is nirvana. And, it's really interesting because, nirvana and I think in Dogen Zenji's teaching and this empty space are really different words, for the same thing. We're just different due to nature or whatever. It's just a different way that we can speak about this reality, different perspectives, with this kind of convention of language, the limitations of our language. But anyway, this empty space means, in this context, it means many things probably, but the major way that I think Dogen Zenji is using it is this, space this universal space that we all occupy. This space in this room is, whether I'm here or not, there's this space is here. It's not, space that's ever added to or taken away. And it's an infinite space. So this means, this entirety of this universe, including individuality, and yet beyond it. So, this empty space contains individual beings, and yet individual beings coming and going are always a part of this empty space. There's no affecting or changing this space, and yet the things within it are always changing and moving. So it's a kind of interesting way to speak about this reality beyond, existence, non-existence, moving, and stillness. As is often the case, Dogen Zenji uses this very kind of profound and unlimited metaphor for the reality of our practice and the reality that we're speaking about in this chapter of Shobogenzo. So anyway, we're on paragraph 8, as I said, and so I'll read that. Indra spoke again to the Buddha, "Honored one, when good men and women accept and keep, read and recite, ponder in accordance with reality, and expound to others this profound Prajna Paramita, which you have just presented, how can I protect them? protect them. World-honored one, I simply wish that you bestow your compassion and teach me. At that time, the elder Subhuti said to Indra, Kausika, do you see a dharma that can be protected or not? Indra replied, no, venerable one. I don't see any dharma that I can protect. Subhuti said, Kausika, when good men and women speak as you have, the most profound Prajna Paramita is itself protection. If good men and women act as you said, they are never separate from the most profound Prajna Paramita. You should know that even if all human and non-human beings wanted to harm them, it would not be possible to do so. Kausika, if you want to protect them, you should do as you said. Wanting to protect the most profound Prajna Paramita and all bodhisattvas is not different from wanting to protect empty space. I really, this is really an amazing part of Shogenzo, but, and there's just, you can speak about just a little tiny piece of it. So I'll do that. There's just, so much that you could say about it. But this first part here, again, Indra again spoke to the Buddha. So Indra, of course, is the king of the gods in Buddhism. He's kind of incorporated from the Vedic traditions, and he's the king of the heavenly realm. In Buddhism, in classical Buddhism, there's these 6 realms of samsara, and it's said that we transmigrate through all of them, and this heavenly realm is the place where all of our desires are satisfied. There's basically no suffering. But it's not really considered a good, birth because you can't practice. It's very hard to practice because there's no suffering to motivate you to practice or to begin, opening, practicing with bodhicitta or to arouse bodhicitta or bodhi mind. So, but anyway, Indra is considered one of the guardian, deities of Buddhism. So he's asking here, how can I protect this Dharma? How can I protect this Prajna Paramita that you have just explained to me? And, how can I help bodhisattvas who are practicing this Prajna Paramita? So I think it's, one thing we could say about this bodhisattvas, all these bodhisattvas, practicing in this empty space is again, as I just sort of said, this reality of individual practice, and yet this universal reality of empty space, as one. How do I, as one and beyond one, two? So, empty space is kind of unity or seeing or understanding our life as one reality. And these bodhisattvas practicing our practice, the individual beings, expressing this Prajna Paramita is a way to talk about it from our individual life. And yet we're not separate from this empty space. We're never able to escape or be other than the space that we, occupy and what occupies us. It connects us to all other beings. We're all sharing this empty space. We're all in the same space. This is kind of one of the things that I talked about last time is we never go anywhere but here. You never get somewhere and say, I'm there now. This is there. You say, this is here. Whether you travel 10 miles, 100 miles, if you could travel 500 light years, you would always be here. And so we're all sharing that same here. And yet our here, it cannot be occupied by you. in a different perspective. My teacher used to say this, and actually in mathematics, or when scientists are studying the universe, or maybe not necessarily, maybe it is mathematics. I think probably this is theoretical in mathematics, and maybe in astrology too, or astronomy too, or cosmology too. But I'm not so up on this, so don't hold me to that. But anyway, in mathematics, apparently, if you're in a space that's infinite, and I think this is the way scientists consider our universe, any spot in that infinite space is the center. It's kind of amazing. You can't go anywhere that's not the center of infinity because it stretches on infinitely. So anywhere you go, each direction you face will be infinite, an infinite space. So each one of us are in the center of this universe, and so usually we kind of we really believe that and misinterpret that, meaning that I'm sort of the god of this universe. This reality revolves around me, you know, uh, and that's completely the opposite, actually, of what this reality is expressing. So, you know, the irony is that we're all completely unique, and we're all completely a product of this infinite universe, a complete time point in time and space that it is expressed by the entirety of this universe. And so our life really is infinite and unique and sacred and sort of deep and endless in some way. And but it's limited at the same time. It's only one point in this limited universe because of our consciousness, because of the way these five skandhas interpret this universe. We can only see from this one tiny perspective and look out on infinity, from this one spot. And of course, every other being also is in this infinite center. And if we don't understand and realize that, we're deeply deluded. We have to understand that even though we're at the center of the universe, our viewpoint or our understanding is extremely limited. And that's the central part of our practice, is to open up our vision and our heart to those other beings who also are at the center of the universe. So conceptually, our realities overlap. Ucham Roshi used to have diagrams about this with little stick men and stuff that were quite good. But we all have our own entire universe that is only our universe, and yet it is conditioned by everything else in the universe. It contains everyone else's universe. So this reality is very difficult to explain conceptually, but also it's sort of easy to see when we settle down into our life as Zen, and try to not grasp onto the ideas that we usually do, that we think of, as either separate or the same. So, it's easy to see that none of us can ever exchange anything truly, fully with another human being. You can never be in this point in time and space that I am in. You can't, exchange my eyeballs with yours and see my world. And yet, you're the point in time and space that you occupy is conditioning my, my world. And so in this moment, it's very clear that, what you're saying and what you're not saying, or you're not saying anything right now, but what I'm saying and perhaps how you're reacting or how, uh, the sun is shining or whatever, all of our, the reality of, these five skandhas receiving, a so-called object of experience from you or from everything, in my world is this self rising. So, there is no self without you, and you or the you that I'm experiencing is just, a very limited perspective, uh, that it's all filtered through the eyes of this person, you know. Anyway, so, that's part of what this, I think this empty space means, and under trying to understand and broaden our perspective on how we can understand and take in and consider and practice with the views of other beings that are life, that are exactly us, and yet exactly 100% not us. Anyway, this is the reality that Indra and Prajna Paramita, this Prajna Paramita that Indra wants to protect, he's asking the Buddha or Subhuti, how he can protect it. So, world honored one, when men and women accept, keep, recite, ponder in accordance with reality, and expound to others this profound Prajna Paramita, which you have just presented, how can I protect them? So he's talking about people practicing, how can I protect people's practice, which is itself Prajna Paramita. So as I said, Indra is the, guardian of the, the Dharma. And the metaphor we often use of Indra's net, in which the entire universe is one huge net, one unity, one net with, individual jewels or knots at each juncture of the net. That's part of where this metaphor comes from the, Avatamsaka Sutra. And so there's a lot of symbolism of this Indra's net, of course, in this conversation too. So, this practicing is our zazen. Of course, that is the foundation of our life and foundation of Prajna Paramita, and that is where we really manifest or are expressing or receiving this Prajna Paramita in its kind of simplest form. And yet, Bodhisattva, as we've talked about through all of this article, all of this fascicle, has to share this reality, has to practice together with all beings, and takes a vow uh, to practice with all beings as oneself. And so it's kind of interesting because it seems like we're probably seeing Indra arousing Bodhi mind. He's just learned that this Prajna Paramita is empty space and this profound kind of reality. And his heart is opened and he's saying, how can I protect this reality? And it's an illustration of what happens to in our practice when we understand this emptiness, that all beings, that there is no dharma to protect. There is no dharma uh, that we can say is in opposition to me. That I am the entirety of Prajna Paramita. It's like we're kind of we're saved, or our suffering is empty, and we are released. When we really understand this, or when we really let go of these five skandhas in Zazen, we're released, of our suffering. And so it doesn't mean we're feeling all the time like, we're walking on cloud nine or understand, um, everything in an omniscient way, or it just means that we have some fundamental understanding of the meaning of our life. And the meaning, is expressed in what we do. There's no meaning outside of what we do or our practice. There's no thing that we separate from ourselves. And yet, this is what happens. So Uchama Roshi expressed this understanding of the self as everything I encounter is my life. When we come to understand there is no dharma to protect outside of this self, outside of empty space, we receive everything as the self. And that is why the heart opens, I think. There's no other out there that we need to protect or compete against. Just only our own minded part that we encounter when we encounter other beings and when we encounter difficult things. So contrary to kind of one of the thoughts about what happens when we understand Prajna Paramita, sometimes the view is that we can then settle back and do nothing, or somehow we've realized emptiness and we can just post and do nothing and accept our freedom. And as I often say, that's exactly not what Shakyamuni did. Once he found his freedom, it compelled him to teach others. That's when he really expressed Buddhahood, in his being awake, is when he began teaching. His compassion was manifest. Um, kind of made a mistake. He made a mistake and said, I will teach beings, even though there are no beings to teach. I see and encounter suffering, and therefore I will teach. So the next part of this text says, at that time, the elder Subhuti said to Indra, Kausika, do you see a dharma that can be protected or not? Indra replied, no, venerable one. I don't see any dharma that I can protect. So Kausika was Indra's name, if I remember this correctly, before he became the king of the Devas. I think his name was Kausika, the lifetime, the birth before he became Indra. So, there's a lot of things being said here. I think, one of them is that usually when we try to help or protect others, or we do some good in this world, we want to see the progress of our results. We feel like, and that's fine, but we feel like we're not really doing good, or maybe our actions aren't worth it unless we see some improvement in the situation that we encountered. But that's kind of it's very natural, but it's kind of a problem, because when do we know then that what our motivation really is? So oftentimes, without our knowing it, our motivation is really to get a good feeling rather than to help other sentient beings, if we're not careful. And it's very difficult to discern what our real motivation actually is, of course. But this teaching, when we see, is there any dharma to protect? No, there is no dharma to protect. And yet I feel compelled to protect these bodhisattvas. So again, we're coming back to doing this thing for its own sake. So it's treating everything as the self. We take care of this body and mind. Really, ultimately, as just as a way of living, as a way of caring and moving through this life. And we don't have to sit back and think about, the cause and effect of brushing our teeth or taking a shower or getting enough rest. Maybe we might do that, but ultimately, um, it's just what we do to take care of our life. And we don't have to say, well, I'm a good person because I brush my teeth, or I mean, we might say that sometimes. We can find almost any way to find, something, to kind of bolster our feeling of, being a good person or a bad person too. But when all is said and done, it's just taking care, of our life. So, um, this is something that, happens in my life, for example. I have to keep coming back to this reality of no dharma and empty space and expressing dharma for itself, for its own sake. So, when I many years ago in Bloomington, when I was thinking and considering and trying to understand what my particular vow would be, in this life with these five skandhas, what could I do? What offering could this limited person do? Um, I decided or understood at some point that I could uh, create a place to do sashins, because I didn't see a place like this, or there's not many places in this country or in the world actually where you can go and do one of these sashins every month, or you can do one and um, go back home or whatever. But I found that this sashin had a really profound influence on my life. And so I wanted to help others. I mean, basically, it's about Zazen, extended Zazen practice. One period of Zazen is one period of entirety of the universe. So it's not like we can measure whether it's better to do one period or 70 periods in 5 days, but some of us who are, especially I think, whose shell of delusion is harder to crack, needs to do this every month in order to have reality, banged over our heads. And so, anyway, this is kind of the way it feels sometimes. But uh, in any case, this sashimi had a profound impact on my life, and so I want to offer it to others. And there's been a lot of work and effort going into doing that over these last 12 years. And, but anytime I start thinking about the number of people who actually do this sesshin with me, or over the years, or any particular sesshin, if I measured the progress in that way, or if I tried to see some difference in some person's life because they sat a period of zazen, I would be completely uh, disappointed, because you cannot. This is something that's not perceptible in that way, and not very many people come to do the sesshin, and not very many people actually come to Yamusuji. And yet, when like this past week, when I finished sesshin, I understood that what I had just done was the most important thing that I could ever do. Somehow I knew, and was full of gratitude. And uh, it felt like, a lot of the weight of the world had been lifted. But, that comes and goes in my life and everyone else's life, of course. But there's something about, me doing one of these sashins that often this can happen, but sometimes it doesn't. It's not, if I ever try to do sesshin in order to get a certain feeling, it won't happen, or it completely uh, completely off the mark. During one sesshin, one can feel the gamut of every emotion ever imagined, and no, not you can't say that any one of them is reality. And that's part of the valuable teaching of sesshin, that it shows us the emptiness of our own mind and experience. So you never get to the end of sesshin and say, I finally arrived, and this is how it's supposed to feel, and this is reality. That's exactly not what, sesshin is teaching us. But it's teaching us, or allowing us to realize that, all things that we experience in our life are a manifestation of Prajna Paramita. And some of them are more comfortable, and some of them are less comfortable. Some of them are hellish. Some of them are heavenly. So it's actually something I meant to mention at the beginning here. There's just a very interesting thing that Subhuti says in passing. He says, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, I guess. He says it a little bit later. Anyway, let me just go ahead and paraphrase. He says it in the next couple of lines here. He says that something like no beings or no human or non-human beings can harm the person who understands Paramita as empty space. And it's interesting because this non-human person thing that might get to us is, I think, a demon. In classical Buddhism, there are demons, and Mara, is the god of the demons, the head of the demons. And so, Mara was the demon that tried to dissuade, Shakyamuni from sitting on his seat of awakening. And of course, though the thing is, really, Mara is never left Shakyamuni. You think of Shakyamuni as kind of defeating Mara at that time, and yet Mara continues to show up throughout the Pali, text, and confront the Buddha again and again. And I think, of course, that means that Mara is part of the Buddha himself. Our demons are our own demons, our own doubts, fears, anxieties, and they definitely show up during sesshin for me. It's the demons of comparing oneself to what one's supposed to be, or what you think others want it to be, or what you think it should be, what you think Dogen Zenji would have thought you would want to be, or Shakyamuni, or whatever convoluted way of reasoning you can come up with, will sometimes, for me, manifest as a demon. And, in our Zazen practice, we just sit there, and these demons come and go, and we just don't move. When Buddha was attacked by all these demons at his seat, he just sat there immovably and just sat in Zazen. There was one point where Mara asked him, who gives you the right, who's your witness that you can sit here in this place of awakening and become a Buddha? And he touched the earth and said, the earth is my witness. And it said that there was a trembling, of the earth, and the earth manifests, that was the way of the earth saying, this is the Buddha, the world honored one, about to become the world honored one. And, of course, I think that means empty space was manifesting. The earth means all of the entirety of the universe was sitting on that place where Shakyamuni had this so-called awakening, that the entirety of the earth and sky and the entire universe awakened with him. And there's some images demons shooting arrows at the Buddha at this point. And the Buddha's, the arrows turned to flowers when they reached, instead of piercing him, they turn into a flower and drop in his lap. And this kind of a beautiful metaphor of, what happens when we study the self, the karmic self, and understand these demons and accept them and bring them into our life as they become the energy for us to practice and gives us insight into how to contact our own body and mind. We see our strengths and weaknesses and we accept them and use them and offer them. And, so one person has one type of demon, another person has another type of demon. And those demons, so where our energy lies to make, an offering. And we can either spend a lot of time fighting the demon, and then our energy gets expended and it is expelled through fighting ourselves. And we don't make an offering. We're making an offering to the demons or to our delusion. But when we sit and accept and practice with those demons, they become a way for us to express Prajna Paramita. I think that's part of the teaching here. When we encounter those things as empty space, as the self, they become part of our energy for life and to make an offering. So so one of those demons can be if we, it's difficult if we see that we're making an offering to ourselves, like we're making an offering because it makes us feel good. The demon of self-judgment can come up and say, you're no good. You're not a Buddhist, a real Buddhist. You're just doing this the way you do anything else. You're making your practice into a toy. You might as well quit. Or but actually seeing this happen is a very deep and important thing, because usually, or I don't know usually, but if we don't see that we're making our offering for this reason, we can never practice with it. And there's a demon down there, that we don't even know about. There's a part in, I just thought of this, there's a part in Shogenzo Zuimonki where one of the monks, is sick and he asked to eat meat, apparently back in the day or whatever, it was more common. I think in the Vinaya, there are certain, or in monastic rules, there are certain times when you're, allowed to eat meat according to the community. If you're sick, maybe it might be one if your body needs it. So anyway, he got permission to eat the meat, and someone went in to give it to him or went to visit him when there was actually a demon on his head eating the meat. That he and I think this means this is what happens. If we're doing these kinds of things without even understanding that we have a demon that's eating the meat, that's sitting on our head or in our heart. We have it's just endless, that there's no way to satisfy the hunger and this sickness. But so it's difficult though to confront that demon. And especially if we realize that we put a lot of stock in, thinking about ourselves in a certain way, as a good person or as an adept or as a smart person, or we see things that are contrary to that. We can either fight that demon and try to disprove it or make it go away, or we can invite it into our life and it becomes our ally, if we keep practicing with it. So anyway, it's another way to say that I think this practicing with empty space means we need to connect here and now with doing something for its own sake, enjoying the moment of making this offering, enjoying our practice, or maybe not enjoying in the traditional sense, but accepting and welcoming it and relishing and savoring it as our life in this moment, rather than something to get to a step somewhere else in the future. Of course, that's the way we practice with empty space, I think. And of course, we want our offerings to have a good effect. That's our aspiration. And yet, we can never be the judge, ultimately, of that, effect. We're very limited in our views. So if we attach to having our views satisfied, it's really endless. We're really we have like a demon eating meat on our head. Then the hunger is insatiable. One thing I will say too about this part of me, offering these sashins and thinking and hearing these demons come up sometime, the demon always has a very limited perspective, and it's always measuring against some kind of conceptual or artificial measurement of what needs to happen. And it's usually very limited, because I can say, well, not that many people come, or I can say, isn't it amazing that actually this person comes here and sits here staring at the wall for, this amount of time for 5 days? Who would imagine that another person in the world would be alive that would want to do this, And it is a miracle. And it's also a privilege because many people, are not able to do this. I understand we have karmic situations that don't allow us to do this. I tell this story often. When I practiced at Tassajara, there were people there who would tell me, I'm here for 3 months and I've worked 10 years, 20 years to arrange my life so that I could practice here for 3 months. And what an amazing thing it is for me that for some reason I'm able to do this every month. And so I have a big responsibility, but also have a lot of joy in making this offering. And I should rejoice. And this is joyful mind, whether or not many people come isn't the point. And it could be, is 10 people a lot? Is 50 people a lot? Or 3 people a lot? It's all relative, When we sit in that moment of Zazen, it really is boundless and beyond measurement. These kinds of artificial measurements that ultimately don't, have meaning unless we compare them to something outside of the self. Okay, so the next part of the text says, Subhuti said, Kausika, when good men and women speak as you have, the most profound Prajna Paramita is itself protection. If good men and women act as you said, they are never separate from the most profound Prajna Paramita. You should know that even if all humans and non-human beings wanted to harm them, it would not be possible to do so. It was right under my nose. It was too close to see. It was in the next line. So another way that this is expressed is that, we can talk so much about this, but we can't control the conditions of our life. We can't control sickness. We can't control natural disasters. We can't control societal events. We have some input to a limited degree in these things, but from a larger perspective, we have very, little control. And so we could, any day I could become ill and have a serious illness and lose my life or lose some function of my body permanently, for example. And so is Subhuti saying that, if we understand Prajna Paramita, that we get magical powers and sickness can't harm us? And of course not. He's saying that we can always practice no matter what. This profound Prajna Paramita, if we encounter everything as our life, inevitably all of us will die. But if we are practicing at that time, we understand that within death, there is no death. And we never leave this empty space. Empty space can never be filled or occupied. We never come or go from this perspective. We're already in empty space and we never leave it. So we have difficult things happening in our society that seem horrible and tragic. And from a conventional perspective, they are. And yet, if we fall into the somehow into despair or anger and resentment, we only fall into samsara, and we only fall into propelling the darker elements of human nature if we forget our practice and say, these people are evil, therefore we have to get rid of them, or this society is no good, I'm going to quit, or whatever it might be. So no matter what happens in our society, we can always practice. And that's what gives us energy to keep going, to make our offering. If we fall into the realm of demons, we become a demon in samsara. If we fall into the realm of judging people or saying they're evil or saying some situation is evil beyond repair, we become, we get into one of these realms, kind of. There's a realm of demons called the Asuras. They're always fighting the Devas. For example, this can happen. They may have righteous causes, but they get their energy from fighting, not from accomplishing anything. That's all they want to do is fight. So, that's what this means. I think the most profound prajna paramita is itself protection. And that is the way Indra, protects us and all beings by protecting, practice. So, just briefly, there was, for example, I can't remember his name now. There was a friend of Uchamaroshi's who lost his legs. And it's been so long. I thought of it this morning. I couldn't find the reference to it again to refresh my memory of who it actually was, because he practiced with a Catholic priest too, who wrote a little book called Silent Prayer or something like this. But he was it's a neat little book. But he was a Japanese Catholic priest, and I don't think it was this guy. Anyway, I'm getting the two mixed up, maybe, but it was. It might have been him actually, but anyway, I think it was either in an accident or I think it was in World War II, possibly. He lost his legs, and he couldn't get out of this funk of resentment that he had lost his legs because his life had completely changed. Of course, everything that he did was different in a different body and mind, and he struggled and struggled with this resentment and anger and the fact that his life was lost now because he didn't have legs. And he said that his one morning he was reborn. And I think this might be why I'm thinking of him as the Catholic priest. But he said one morning he realized he was reborn because he quit comparing himself to who he thought he should be with legs. And the person here and now in this moment was born uh, with a full, enriching life. He happened to have no legs. But once he started, quit attaching to this view of what needed to be and who he would have been if he had legs, he was reborn. And, this kind of demon uh, became energy for his life. This demon was accepted into his heart. This demon of resentment gave him energy to inspire the people. And he wrote books and became just, a very engaged, deeply thoughtful person. So that's what being protected. It doesn't mean that this Prajna Paramita will prevent you from losing your legs in an accident if it happens, but it will allow you to practice. So there will be some way for you to practice, and that's why no demon can harm you in this Prajna Paramita. The text says, Pasika, if you want to protect them, you should do as you said. Wanting to protect the most profound Prajna Paramita and all bodhisattvas is not different from wanting to protect empty space. So I think the main point here is that if we're not careful, we get stuck because Indra was the guardian, a guardian deity of Buddhism, uh, but if we forget that actually the Sangha that we're protecting is the Sangha of all beings, we make a big mistake. If we say we have to promote these just more than their life is worth more than these people, the Muslims, because the Buddhists actually know about Prajna Paramita. And so we better make sure that they, are protected more. We make a very big mistake because there are no, in Prajna Paramita, there are no Buddhists and no Muslims in this. There are no Christians. There's just this reality. And so protecting empty space, when we're really protecting the Dharma, that means the Dharma of all beings of this universe, the entirety of this universe. So, Dogen Zenji in his, Kyoju Kaimon, his comments on the precepts, talks about the absolute three treasures. And in that, there are three types of three treasures that we take refuge in. And one of them is the absolute three treasures, which means every individual being is a member of our community. And now, science shows this in, the study of ecosystems and so forth, and cosmology. And, it's very well known in this realm that everything is connected to everything else. And all of us are living one life. But if we think that we need to protect a certain group of people because they're doing the right thing and it's at the expense of someone else, it's a problem. Of course, the difficulty is that sometimes we have to make choices that are difficult, and we do sometimes, seemingly harm other beings through trying to help the overall good. Yet we do that with a heart of repentance. So if we think we have the right to do that because we're somehow Buddhist and we know this Prajna Paramita, that's kind of a defilement of the self. Like just a very tiny, minuscule example of this at Gyobutsuji is that we have this problem with mice I talk about often. And, we, a lot of mice have died there. We try to preserve them and take them out. But, you know, if we say, well, we can just kill as many mice, or we can kill as many snakes, or we can cut down as many trees as we want because this is in the service of the Dharma, the highest good, it's really a problem. One time there was I wrote about this somewhere, but there's a dogwood tree right next to our deck at Gyobusuji that's been there, of course, since I've been there. It's a beautiful tree, and it, especially when I first got to Gyobusuji, and nobody knew of anything, before anybody knew of it, and when I felt really alone there, I felt a lot of comfort in that tree when it would bloom every year. It has these beautiful white flowers on it, and I just felt like it was making such an offering, to me and to the property, just selflessly kind of giving, of itself, this beautiful tree. And one year, I think it was pretty early on, there was a serious drought, and it started to lose its leaves. And I didn't really know the rhythm of the land very well at that time, but I kind of panicked and I thought, well, this tree is going to die. And it, could have, but I started, long story short, I started getting, pond water. So we have a little pond that's not so far away. And I started, at that time, there wasn't any way to get it directly through the pipes, but, so I was taking a wheelbarrow up and pouring water from the pond on the tree. And I was thinking about, the tree was perking up and what a good thing I was doing. And at some point, I looked into the water and saw that there were living beings in that water, that were dying because I was putting them on the tree. And so, there were little, water bugs and things that we consider, lower animals like leeches and little mosquito larvae and stuff that most, we think, well, those are not really worthwhile. But that's a mistake because that's a human perspective to that leech. It's the center of the universe. Yeah. That leech has its own world, even though it's crazy to say. And we're destroying a world, when we destroy that creature. But in the end, I said to myself, I think this tree is more important, and I'm going to keep watering it. But I had to do that as an act of repentance, though, because I don't really, if I say I have the right to do it because I'm a human being, and human beings and dogwood trees are more important than leeches, that's a completely diluted understanding of Prajna Paramita. But as a human being, we have to do these things. We have to sometimes take away the mice, or, we have to cut down a tree, maybe. A lot of insects or animals have died on that property because of me being there. And in the end, I have faith that it's worth it. Rather than just doing nothing, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. But I don't know that. And to the beings that died, it's definitely not worth it. To the mice that die because, we couldn't get them out of the trap because it was too cold, the live trap, we try to trap them live and take them away. Some of them don't survive. If you let them go for a while, they really are destructive. So we have to keep, they really can do a lot of damage. It's amazing. But to that mouse, it doesn't think that, it doesn't have any of these ideas about the Dharma, or it just has its own center of the universe that is pushing. So these kinds of things we need to do, but we do them with a heart and mind of repentance and a certain amount of sorrow, And I think in Buddhism is part of the reason we started doing ceremonies, and actually, our zazen is the offering for these beings. Our zazen practice is our offering to sort of our repentance to go back to this reality. Do zazen, part of the reason is because of the harm we cause in this world, we offer it back. Once the Waki Roshi died, he said, "Don't do any ceremonies for me," and they did a 49-day sesshin for him. He just said, "Do zazen," and people would come to honor Sawaki Roshi, this great Zen master, and they were just like, "Okay, will you sit down and offer a period of zazen?" There was none of the big bells and whistles for this very famous, Zen master. He just did zazen, and he knew that was the most genuine for repentance and support for him. So, does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Any comments or observations today about anything?
So this is I don't know exactly how to describe what I'm getting at. So I know in my own practice, the general practice is to kind of not or do my best to stay away from kind of judging, my zazen, right? Like is it going well? Is it going poorly? But at the same time, I've definitely noticed some things in my life, like when I do XYZ, maybe I do it at this time of day, or I have too heavy of a meal or not, like various different things that from my subjective perspective, the Zazen session seems to be better, like more relaxed per se, or easier to get through in some way. And I just wondered if I could get your thoughts on whether I should let that sort of subjective observation kind of influence, what I do with the rest of my life, and kind of, oh well, I know if I do this, my zazen's likely to go better later, and I'm not saying like, get attached to the idea, oh, it must go better later, but just let that observation influence how I live the rest of my life, or kind of just, not really pay that much attention to it. Um, I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it's one of the most difficult things for us to understand, and just it's kind of a really essential teaching of Dogen Zenjin. I think Shakyamuni, too, is that um, the way we express this reality beyond discrimination, we have to use discrimination. It's a complete, seems like a complete contradiction, but we have to use cause and effect in order to express this reality beyond cause and effect. Cause and effect is really just a human concept. If you really analyze it, you never will find the cause, and you never will find the ultimate effect, of force. There's no source there, and the causes and conditions are infinite. And yet, if we don't pay attention to it, our life falls apart. you know, and all of Buddhism is based on cause and effect from a certain perspective. And all of Buddhism is about going beyond, cause and effect is two. So the thing is to, for me, in the Zazen realm, a very practical question like yours, you have to get enough sleep in order to get up in the morning. Or if you don't want to be falling asleep during Zazen, get to bed at a certain time. or don't, you know, during sesshin, especially if I eat a big meal before, the next period of zazen, there's more likely I'll fall asleep or um, have a more difficulty. And yet, you say, well, my zazen is better if I'm more awake, is misses the point. So, because when we get into that realm, we really start misunderstanding the nature of zazen that goes beyond, judgment. But at the same time, we need to use cause and effect in order to have the energy and strength for our practice. So I think it's very important to observe these kinds of things and observe like when I don't get enough rest, I'm more likely to get grumpy, and I'm more likely to say something unskillful to someone that I wouldn't normally do. You know, and so if I am speaking skillfully to someone, or I don't really know, but I know when I'm not. When I'm not doing it, it's very apparent, but I don't ever sort of, if I kind of pat myself on the back someday and say, wow, I'm really was skillful in talking to that person. I'm, a good counselor or whatever. That's silly. I wouldn't do that. Or, if you do, it's something to immediately recognize as not very realistic. So, and at the same time, when we do fall short of our expectations we don't want to stay stuck in the judgment there either, but we have to observe the cause and effect in order to do better next time. Because the way we're redeemed, is to come back to the present and just repent by coming back and expressing this Prajna Paramita now, here and now. So sometimes we need to reflect, and might be some regret. Human beings, I think, need a healthy dose of regret sometimes. But to get stuck there and judge ourselves is also counterproductive. Another way of kind of indulging in the self. To say, well, I'm not a good Buddhist because I couldn't get up for zazen 3 days in a row, or whatever it might be, or um, is not so helpful if we stick to that and quit, for example. Say, what's the point? So yeah, it's a good observation and question, but I think we need to always just be aware of when, judgments rather than discernment is coming up. To me, there's a difference, and it's probably just my own, but, discerning what to do in the realm of cause and effect is different than judging the goodness or badness of something, the ultimate goodness or badness of something. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon.